Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show. I am actually a user of your product,
Nice.
Life360.
Thanks for having me. I didn't realize you were a user. So
Yeah,
bonus.
having 4 children, it is incredible for us. And so, why don't you tell us like how you became the CEO and founder of Life360? You've gone through an incredible, probably whirlwind and a major achievement this year. But let's start with like how you became CEO and founded Life360.
There's a short version and a long version. The long version has to do with me getting a job offer to be a dishwasher and to Antarctica. We can cover that if you want. The short version, though, is I was in college during Hurricane Katrina. It was obviously a huge mess, seeing how families couldn't reconnect after big emergencies. I did a business plan as a school project. It was actually pre-smartphone about using SMS to help families find each other after big emergencies. Finished college, wasn't actually planning on doing this, but a few things led to another. And I did a prototype of Life360 when it was still more emergency focused on the then upcoming Android platform. So iPhone had come out, no third-party apps yet. Android was just announced, and it was going to be the first phone that actually let you get location on the device. Like, oh, this is the way to do that thing that was in my head. And we built a version that was lit on an emulator, so a screen, there was no device. And when we built this thing that was meant for helping people find each other in emergencies, like, wait, there's something bigger here. And that bigger thing is like knowing where people are. It's actually really cool. It's not that creepy once you actually kind of see it in action. And it was the era of social networks for everything. And a lot of people were going after families. And we thought, what if everyone's going to have a smartphone? And what if the way to really bring families digital in the same way Facebook did friends, LinkedIn did professionals was communication and safety? And so our one and only pivot was in that first year of existence, where we do want to be this much bigger family network with an anchor around coordination, of which safety is a part. And now 17 years later or whatever it is, here we are.
How did you grow it in that time frame? Like, at what point were you like, we've got something here? Like, this is something that, and let's really start throwing gas on the fire because people are starting to really like what we're doing.
Yeah, I'll answer it a bit differently. It wasn't gas in the fire. We're always struggling to stay alive. But in the early, there are multiple breakpoints. In the early days, the most controversial thing, which is just insane in hindsight, is like most VCs in our very, very early rounds, like, teenagers aren't going to have smartphones. So that obviously turned around very quickly. So that when everyone got smartphones, that was one. Another big inflection point for us was when Apple launched Find My. And we were like, oh, crap, are we done? Here's Apple. They're coming our direction.
Yeah.
This sounds like corporate speak, but it's very factual. Like, we skyrocketed. So as soon as Apple came into the space, it was the best thing that had happened to us, because the big issue around location was people didn't understand it. It felt scary. And so Apple doing this, it just opened up the floodgates. And then another thing, this is very technical, but a lot of what we do to not kill a battery requires non-chip accelerometer. So how you're driving, car crashes, all that. So it was a technical breakthrough that was probably 2016 timeframe. So we were like a slowly boiling frog. We were never a company that had like 500% year over year growth. Just steadily grew, and we grow 30% a year. But now we grow 30% a year. That's like tens of millions of people, even though it took us probably over 10 years to get our first 10 million. So no exact moment in time. But I think the thing now that gets us really excited is you don't have to convince a millennial why you should use Life360. And millennials, of which I'm an old one, are now the prime parent demographic. And it's flipped from, is there a big market here, to, oh my God, this is such a big market. How are we going to maintain our leadership position when the TAM is billions of people? And it's been, that's the word I'd be looking for here, amusing, interesting, vindicating, frustrating, that like it went from investors being like, there's no market here. This is niche. Who wants to track their kids? Like, if you have good kids, if you trust your spouse, why would you ever use this thing? To like, this thing is so big, $100 billion opportunity. How are you going to survive when Apple's looking at you? So very bipolar in that regard. But that makes us feel like we have something, because universally, no one questions our TAM. It's all about this TAM is so big. How do you win?
Yeah, you certainly have something. And it'd be good for you to explain like how your product, because obviously like you can share your location on an iPhone and things like that.
Yeah.
But Life360 is so much more than that. And I think you have a big enough moat here that I'm not sure Apple can really penetrate it. But you tell me, I mean, it'd be good to explain the product, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So if you look at the product, it does start with just at the core, I think relatively objectively, just the best location sharing app out there in a very generic but better way. And you could probably vouch for that as a customer. Find My is kind of like it's rough around the edges. Google stuff rough around the edges, and most of our competitors also rough around the edges because it's a lot harder to do location sharing well than it looks. But then the longer term differentiation is that we are about family, family, family. And the features that we have, they don't really make sense for a large group. So we've gone really deep as driver safety. How are you driving? Do you need a tow truck? And then the biggest one, in an accident, we can actually detect it from the sensors on the phone, send you an ambulance. And we do that with a human operator that walks you the whole way through. So that's one example where we have other features that only make sense in a family use case. We have tons of different smart notifications, got to school, low battery, finish a drive, how fast you were going. Unlikely that other people do that because it really doesn't make sense for friends. And then our membership has a whole bunch of other safety stuff wrapped around it. Disaster medical, travel assistance, identity theft protection, data breach alert, stolen phone protection. We're trying to move to this world where if you're worried about anything, Life360 has your back. And now we're adding hardware so you can have pets and things as well. We're a little more nascent here, but we bought Tile about 2 years ago, a whole new lineup coming out soon. So it's really going to be, if you have a family, if you're coming to the service for protection, smaller group coordination, just a very different product. So when we think about Apple, it's not even necessarily a moat per se. It's Apple very well might win. Like, I just need basic location sharing to share with a friend, or if I'm meeting up with someone, like, yeah, use Apple. But if you're that family organizer, you're kind of getting navigating that day. Our features really are differentiated in a way that make us different, and that was a very intentional decision as well. We have been the first to say location is a commodity. It's been surprising how long it's taken to actually come true, but in the same way that photo sharing is a commodity, same with location is what you do with it. And so for us, it's ongoing differentiation around the family.
By far, I have a daughter who just passed her driver's test. And so she has a license now. By far, my favorite feature is how fast she's going.
Yeah.
I love that. But that's kind of like a new thing for us. Like, by the way, I have Tile on all my stuff because I lose everything. So I use Tile all the time as well. But
another thing. Oh, sorry.
I loved like
go ahead.
how fast they were going. How fast they were going is a brilliant feature.
And are you more worried about her or her boyfriend?
Don't even say. She doesn't have a boyfriend and never will. No, I'm just kidding.
Never will. I've told my daughters when they're 35 they can date.
Yeah, that sounds fair.
So we'll see. On the Tile topic, another thing's a bit of a differentiator for us is we think those devices can both be safety devices, very easy to kind of think SOS functionality. So I'm kind of giving a wig nudge nudge to some upcoming stuff we're doing there. And the other thing that does differentiate us from every Bluetooth device on the market is we do have an anti-theft mode where you can, if you scan your ID, agree to a big fine, you can opt out of those annoying alerts, which are great to prevent stalking, which is fortunately rare, but mess up the ability of a hardware device to prevent theft. So one thing that's happening a lot with AirTags is you put it on your bike and then a thief steals your bike and you think you're protected, but the thief gets like, hey, AirTag following you, and they just disable the thing. So I think we have taken a approach that is still very safe for women and people could be stalked because like you have to scan an ID to opt out of that. And if you're a bad guy, you've literally given a government ID that you're going to get thrown in jail for. But now we actually can use Tile devices to stealthily track your things in a way that will prevent theft. And I think we're going to see that the idea in the next few years that you could lose a dog, a laptop, a bike, a car, it's just going to be downright archaic. And I think we can really be front and center with that safety and protection theme in the same way that we've differentiated with Find My, do that with devices as well.
Did you have to work with like government agencies and stuff to figure out that whole fine and submitting your ID and stuff?
No, we did that ourselves. We do engage with regulators just to be open about what we're doing, because I think it's very, very easy to sensationalize that because it looks like we're kind of helping the bad guys. Like, no, we're really not, because you can literally go on like Amazon and buy a stealth tracker you put in the SIM. So if you want to do some work, there's some really advanced and bad guy trackers. And so I think by our act of making you do a scan ID, and people say, well, can't you just take a picture of someone else's ID? No, we do a liveness check. So you open the phone, you have to turn like this, turn like that, LiDAR scanning. If you have a newer phone, it's very hard to fake it.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love that. What does a typical day look like for you? Oh, by the way, before we even get to that, we should say like, hey, you IPO'd in June. Like, I can't believe
we did,
like,
yeah.
And so your the day-to-day life of a CEO of a public company versus a private company must be different.
Yeah. So we've been public actually for 5 years. So we started on the ASX. We moved to the NASDAQ. So our move back was...
We moved to the NASDAQ in June.
Yes. So we've been public for 5 years. Public versus private doesn't necessarily change my day other than earnings. This is not exactly what you asked, but the thing I notice being public versus private is you have an external forcing function that is both good and bad. So one thing I think that happens with companies as they get bigger and they get financially stable, you lose that existential threat of going bankrupt. And it's very easy to start doing things that are not mission critical. And no one's going to debate that. Like everyone, it's just common sense, but in practice, it's really hard to avoid getting a little bit fat and lazy. So if you're public, every quarter, you're going to be put in a pressure cooker. And if you have a really good quarter, it doesn't mean, oh, then you can kind of skate for the rest of the year. All the analysts are going to put up the projections. So if you have a good quarter, the goalposts are moved higher. If you have a bad quarter, you have all the scrutiny why things didn't go well. So you cannot be lazy as a public company. It's very, very hard. So in terms of my day-to-day, it hasn't changed all that much, but we are in a very constant cycle of public market communications, earnings releases, having to orient the market. A lot of that is done by our finance team, but that pressure is real. The downside of some of that is it doesn't make you have a bit more of a short-term lens in a way I really get frustrated about, because on one hand, that discipline is great, but on the other hand, sometimes you want to be able to say, I'm going to kind of not hit numbers for a few quarters. I want to invest further out into the future. I don't want to have to show ongoing financial leverage. And then after the crash in 2022, it was like every year or every quarter, we had to show that loss was shrinking and flipping to profitability, which we've now done. Or it's not just the EBITDA break even, full profitability is what we've guided to for next year. So that's a lot of the change. I'd say in terms of my day-to-day, the scale of size and having more people and having more prevalence, that's probably what changed my day-to-day more than being public per se, because we just have a lot more attention. We have a lot more people, more problems, and we are big enough now where there's press, there are regulators. I'd say we as a company, we stir emotions in all directions. Some parents, such as yourself, love us for, I think, very good reasons. There are also a lot of people that say, like, this is Big Brother. You're taking kids' freedom away from them. You're not trusting them. You're not letting them spread their wings. It's very ironic. I was the ultimate free-range kid. As an aside, my parents let me go to Africa by myself when I was 11. So we can dive into that. We are actually a perfect tool for free-range kids because you can give them freedom without panicking. But then we have regulators. It's data. It's kids. It's advertising. It's location. And then we're working with insurers, I think, in a very good way that you should like. Like, it sounds like your daughter speeds sometimes. So maybe she does not want to opt into usage-based insurance. But I want to be able to tell people, like, hey, you're a great driver. You really should have an insurance rate based on how you drive. That's a win for customers. But anyway, I bring that up, which is like we evoke a lot of strong emotions, and I think our move to the NASDAQ as well does put our prominence and profile up as a company even more. So I do have to navigate that side of things in a way that's not natural for me, because I'm sort of I meet the archetype of a 0 to 1 aggressive, brash disruptor type, and so figuring out that balance, and even Christy, been on the call, I think I make people uncomfortable a bit because I am not the buttoned up, polished CEO.
That's perfect. That's exactly what we need in today's day and age, particularly the company that you have. How do you decide where to spend your time each day as CEO?
It depends the day, obviously. I think a lot of stuff is, unfortunately, I struggle with it, is the honest truth, because a lot of the stuff I feel like I'm spending time on sometimes feels very low leverage, and I can look at my day and I've done 15 phone calls, and did I really have the impact there? And so I do try to say, all right, this just comes with the territory of getting bigger. The things I want to make sure do I have the right people in place, and how do I not lose sight of always hiring? Because as you get bigger, you just can't do everything. I also am trying to find what are the 1 or 2 strategic areas I really want to dive in on, because I can't do all of them. Then there is all the public company outward stuff where I have to do some of that. Interviews like this are kind of fun. I get to meander and all that. I'm not going off a script. The thing I hate with a passion is doing that. Read the earnings like a robot. And of course, I'm not supposed to sound like a robot, but it's freaking robotic. Every word is written out. It's all public. The lawyers have reviewed it. And then the rinse and repeat. That's the worst part of the job. But that's forced on me. Quarterly earnings, AGMs, and maybe if I ever get a little bit further along in life, I can have our CFO do it. But I'm not at Elon level. I can just say deal with the CFO. I don't think that would go over well.
it takes a minute to get to the Elon level is what I've come to understand. Speaking of
Yeah, and then how
robots,
do you do that without being a bit of a jerk too? So I think some people probably think I'm pretty hard and maybe a little bit insensitive, but I fundamentally like to think I'm nice. I don't think Elon's nice, so it's a little disappointing that so many of our most successful CEOs are kind of just assholes. And so how do you be a hard driver without doing that?
yeah, why do you think that
Not easy.
is? Like you look at like I mean, I'm sure you've read Walter Isaacson's Jobs book
Yeah,
about all about Steve Jobs and things like that, and it sounds like he
I,
and Elon maybe had pretty similar personalities there. Why do you think that's the case?
I don't think it's that complicated at all, honestly, now that I've seen it. Is you get constant pressure for more people wanting to come in, tell you what to do, the bloat happens, and somebody just need a person to like, I don't care how you feel, I'm just giving it to you raw. Take it, leave it, go, push, you'd steamroll. And I think the thing there is like that works when you're massively successful because everyone wants to kind of hitch to your wagon. And so if you are an outlier and you do have one of these true visionary leaders who's probably smarter than most of their people, and you give him credit, like whether you like Elon or hate him, he's putting electric cars, rockets, like, geez, the guy's a genius. Started OpenAI, get on board, get
Yeah,
off or
I mean,
not,
the
and he
track
just
record
steamrolls
speaks for
you.
itself, right? It's crazy. Like I mean, there's nobody like him in today's
Yeah,
modern era, right? Like, I
yeah.
mean, he's like Henry Ford, who's also maybe not
Yeah.
that good of
And so I think as a second tier CEO or third, I don't know where I am on the tiers. Depending who you're benchmarking me, you can put me in different ones, but I have to be a bit more of a diplomat. And Elon, Steve Jobs, they're kings. And maybe not the most benevolent, but they're so smart and they're so good and they push, push, push. But what I see is I get so much pressure, not intentionally, to like remove outliers. I think a lot of big companies, a lot of even being public, is they remove the downside because they stop you like being public. We can't do anything crazy without really risking the market. But that limits
Mhm.
upside because like crazy drives outlier results. And so I think that's more common in the private markets and sort of allowed, so to speak, because you're not getting ongoing scrutiny. But in the public markets, and you get to scale, I think the true outliers, I think that ruthlessness is a competitive edge. I know a lot of people tell Elon and Steve Jobs, you don't need, they could do that without being jerks. And maybe in some theoretical sense they could, but I think you need someone who is just going to be a bulldozer and own it and embrace the chaos. And okay, at some point Tesla still might all blow up in its face. But if you want the outlier results, you need the bulldozer.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, you were mentioning like being robotic on your calls and stuff, and it brought to mind artificial intelligence and AI and kind of the growth of that and how it's permeating every company, no matter what type of company you
Yeah.
are. How are you inside
Yeah.
of there?
So there's, I think, our internal productivity and then what we do kind of externally, and they're two very different things. Externally, which I think mainly where you're going, in terms of the wave of generative AI, there's not a lot that's like fundamental to us that wasn't there before this big wave. Of course, we're going to do customer support. We're already doing translations, but that's not exactly customer facing per se. Internal productivity, though, there's a lot we're doing, a ton with AI. So I'm so bullish on that. I personally, every email I write, if press release, whatever, I can go so much faster with AI, and because I just write like
Yeah.
crap, and I kind of can talk back and forth with it. At first, I was looking really smart, and people didn't know I was so quick on things. It's like ChatGPT. The teenagers know how to do it already. They just picked it up in seconds. So I am a youth in that regard. I've not atrophied as into the old middle age guy, not learning new things.
That's awesome. What are you reading? What reading recommendations would you have?
Okay, I'll literally give the last book I read and other weird things I do. I read a book called High Weirdness by a guy named Eric Davis, and I think that what was it was drugs, esoterica, and mysticism in the 1970s.
Yes,
And
this
it
is
was
cool.
have you heard of it?
No, but I'm in.
No, it's a hard read. I was having to like look up every other word because it's not easy. The last one word I looked at was anamnesis, which is a sudden re-remembering of lost, forgotten information. But it was the book basically tracked Philip K. Dick and Terrence McKenna and a couple others around just what was it in the 70s that happened around this like zeitgeist culturally around breaking norms, psychedelics, and it kind of got lost and it's all resurfacing now. That was my last book. As an aside, I also did find out I was babysat in Philip K. Dick, who most people may or may not know, is the sci-fi author in his old bedroom. I only found that out a few years ago. So there's a whole weirdness of Life360, which is very Philip K. Dickian, and that like surveillance, Big Brother, and very very random. For people who don't know him, his books are like Blade Runner, Total Recall, Adjustment Bureau, Man in the High Castle. So you've almost assuredly watched movies.
Yeah, one of the greats. Definitely one of the greats.
Exactly.
What do you read day to day? Do you read news, Wall Street Journal, things like that, or do you tune that stuff out?
No, I'm an addict. It's very bad. When I get another break, I want to break my phone addiction. I don't read pop culture stuff, but I enjoy reading more academic material. And then I keep up with the business news and politics and all of that. But I do very well in Trivial Pursuit, other than the pop culture question. So it's that can probably give you an insight into what I read. And sports, sports and pop culture. I need a teammate.
Okay, that makes sense. What, in your opinion, are the three most important traits or attributes of a leader?
Probably, I think it depends. It's not one size fits all. Maybe I'll. One thing I was trying to figure out, I'll answer your question more indirectly. I've made it pretty far in life, and I'm trying to figure out why. What is that secret sauce that I have? And more just not looking to pat myself on the back, more just learning, like, what is that thing I'm good at? Because I one frame there, like, very few people are the best in the world at anything, but if you find three things you're like above average at and can somehow pair them together, that might make you actually almost the best in the world at something, because as you kind of get that geometric effect, like, what is it? So for Life360 and me, which is not generic leader, like I am extremely assertive. I have no regard for social norms, which is why I kind of lean in here, and I'm more persistent than almost anybody, which can lead to stubbornness and a bit of obstinance if I'm not careful. And so I think as we've scaled, I've tried to figure out how do I maintain those things while also growing in ways I need to grow. And so I think it's hard to have a generic answer, because like, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to maintain something? Are you trying to disrupt something? What type of business are you? Like, I don't think I could ever run a sales-led business. I don't think anyone would want to hire me as like take a scaled business and manage it. I'm the more disruptor archetype.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do this forever. So I've been trying to figure out, like, well, what am I good at? And what are my three things that I've been above average at? And that's helping me kind of frame what is my role here going forward? What are the things that I want to delegate because I'm just never going to be good at them? What are the things like I don't want to lose in the company that got us to where we are? Because it's very easy to, as you get bigger, you kind of get pulled in so many directions.
What do you know now that you wish you had known at the beginning of your career?
There's so many. I never thought this would be like a 17-year journey. I assumed most likely it would fail, and I was going to go back to business school and just try to make money in a very boring way for financial security. I just assumed this would fail, or I thought it'd be quick. So I was not intentional falling in here. So I just think as you get older, like the just how these little choices you make early on can like have decade-long impacts. I don't think I'd necessarily do anything differently because I got lucky, very, very lucky. But that's interesting to me. I just that whole butterfly effect, a little decision here and it's changed your entire life. Another one, this is super more cliche. One bad piece of advice I think people get is like, okay, when you're estimating, realize things are harder than they are, so double the time. The reason that's bad advice is that you think you only need to double. It's like, you know what, it's probably, and that might sound, when you have a big vision, I'm not exaggerating that, because each time you get bigger, add more people, the complexity grows exponentially. So when I look at the Life360 vision, I probably oversimplified by 100x. And so I do think there is a theme where people think they're putting in buffer, and it's when you don't know what you're doing, just how hard it is to do anything it's just insane. So I don't think that's novel advice about needing to focus and all that, but I always thought it was, I doubled the estimate, I'm good. Like, no, I was still oversimplifying, and I still have not solved that. I'm always shocked by how hard things are to do. But the positive side, the reason startups exist is that, like, this is just the rule of nature, is you get bigger just tech debt, bigger surface area, prominence. You get a few advantages, but it's the old analogy is like you're a battleship. When you turn the battleship, you can bulldoze everybody, but you lose that agility of a speedboat. And we should be happy about that because it's the only reason that these mega monopolies don't own the entire world.
Yeah, that's a good point. Finally, well, I have two final questions for you. One is, as a CEO, and I think you realize this and probably are more aware of this, probably more than most leaders, is your responsibility that society seems to be handing you these days of speaking out and being public and expressing your opinions on things that really have nothing to do with your business expertise or Life360 at all, right? I wonder, I don't really care, or I'm not trying to like get your opinion on that. Like, what is your opinion on like the state of things?
Yeah.
But I would love to know your opinion on like, how does it feel to have that responsibility?
I have an extremely independent streak, and I am uncontrollable. And that is, so when I feel constrained, I get angry. And I think a lot of why some tech leaders, and I'm saying this generically, like have kind of flipped a little away to the right and libertarianism is that feeling of being controlled. Because I think we all have our different soft underbellies. I think aggressive, assertive founders, that feeling of being controlled it just gives you a reflex of like, anger. So I don't like it. I freaking hate it. But we do have a no politics rule at the company. So we really have not, I think we've done better than most, around avoiding that. And one thing we did a couple of years ago more proactively, we actually moved away from using things like words like DEI, there's no secret conservative dog whistle here, but having a conversation with our head of people where this was getting polarizing, and she had different views than me, I had different views than hers externally. But we got to the first principles, we were actually pretty aligned. So like, let's just zoom out. Let's talk about what we care about as a company, because almost all, if you actually look at what underlies, take the politics out, there's a lot of alignment. And so we're like, what are we aligned on? What are we trying to do? And as part of that, we just said we are things that tie to political affiliations or things outside the mission, we're not going to comment on. And so I think that's really helped us, especially after October 7th. Here's our policy. We stayed out of it. And then we've had a lot of credibility where we're not picking and choosing. We're just not in there. And so we haven't had any of the issues that many companies have had because we've been consistent, not secretly only doing it when it favors one side or the other. We're just out of it. Other than stuff that impacts families directly. So we are thinking about getting involved in like limiting screen times for kids, as an example, because like right in our wheelhouse as a business, but we're otherwise apolitical.
Yeah, that makes sense. Were you surprised when Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong got so heavily criticized for doing that?
No, I was not surprised the criticism, and I'm happy that is now more than norm. Some companies I think did use it as a bit of a right-wing dog whistle. I can't comment on whether Coinbase did or did not do that, but I think you are seeing a lot of companies like us, which are like, this is not us aligning left or right. We are just being very clear outside of any controversy. If you are looking for a company that encourages activism in any direction, we are not the right company for you. And I think there is a pretty big wave of companies doing that now in a very non-political way that is effective. I think there's an acknowledgement things got a little bit, they swung too far in terms of what was expected at work and what was productive for companies or society.
Finally, we ask everybody this question to end every interview, and that is at CEO.com. We believe the chances one gives is just as important as the chances one takes.
Yep.
When you hear that, who gave you a chance to get you to where you are today?
I have so many of them. I will talk about two people. One was, so I enlisted in the military when I was 17, grew up middle class. A lot of military people in startups, they're usually officers, but I was a grunt. I came out and I went to a community college, and one of my professors there really took me under his wing, and the first non-friends and family check came from him, and he actually gave me the basement of his house, and he really encouraged me to do something a little bit riskier. So his name's Robert Kennedy. No affiliation with the Robert Kennedy you're thinking of. And so he really was such a great mentor to me, and community college professor who took that chance on me. And then another one, I have a board member who gave me a first check on truly arm's length. He's actually with me today, James Singh, who's been along the journey the whole way, and a lot of support. Those are early ones. I also have a chairman, John Coughlin, who's been like a great mentor for me. over the years. He was CEO of Visa and joined our board in the seed stage. And it's kind of a weird board member, like CEO of Visa seed company. But now Republic has been, so I've had a mentor that's in there. So those are the three that come to mind within the business context. I feel badly for not saying more because there are so many, but since this is a Life360-esque interview, that was my chain. And I'd also thank my parents for, they were always like, don't worry about security. I have all sorts of issues with my parents. I mean, but they were like, be independent, spread your wings, take risks. They never tried to put me in a box or bucket, and I appreciate that.
Chris, thank you so much for coming on. Seriously, congrats on what you've built. It's unbelievable. Again, I use the product every day. I use Tile every day.
Thank you.
Everything you like, it's very rare that somebody comes on here and I literally interact with their product every day. So
thank you. Glad we have you as a customer, and I'm very excited to show you some of the stuff we have coming up in the future. And I don't know if you have pets, but I'm hoping if we do another interview in a year or two, you're gonna have all your pets on here as well. So we'll see.
I do have pets.
Okay, we got to stay in touch on that one.
Appreciate it.